Hello, friends, and welcome back to the podcast, or welcome, I should say, to the first episode. And today we're talking about the oldest church in Detroit uh, in continuous use, which would be St. Peter and Paul Jesuit Church. And my guest is Carol Goll, and she's been a member of our church for 40 years. And I have heard her referred to as the resident historian. So, what better person to have on the podcast than to talk about the oldest church in Detroit? Carol was a manager for 34 years in the city of Detroit. I think she served under four different mayors. Um, and she coordinated multiple care programs, grant programs, care programs for homeless people, senior adults, financial management, neighborhood development. Um, she continues to she served on multiple nonprofit boards, and she continues to volunteer in those regards. Um, which included Oasis Detroit, Cass Community Social Services Board, and also Volunteers of America on the Michigan board. And anyway, she was just a delight to interview. Uh, I appreciated her sharing all of her stories. She could have shared a ton more than she did, but I was grateful for what she shared with us. And we talk about kind of the how this Jesuit church came into formation. Um, it's almost 177 years old. So there's obviously been a lot that has happened. The church was built when Abraham Lincoln was still senator. He hadn't even been elected president yet. So there were a lot of uh, things that have transpired over the last 177 years in the community, right? So you can imagine the community has changed. It was a frontier town to what it is today. And we're excited to be part of the revitalization of Detroit, to watch it come back from where it was and to be a part of this community. So I think you're going to enjoy this episode. Kind of get to know us a little bit, and get to know Carol, before we get into some of our other topics. So enjoy the episode, and hey, let us know that you listened to the podcast. Uh, well, I don't have your bio cheat sheet with me, so I do know you worked for the city for 34 years, right?
Correct.
And you did grant writing, but you did some other stuff too, right?
A lot more than just grant writing. I was a grant manager.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I was I retired as a division head. I had supervised 24 people, and our job was to implement a lot of neighborhood projects. So we had to not only go out and monitor and make sure the money was being spent where it was supposed to be spent, but we also had to do the whole financial uh, process of contracting and all that sort of thing. So that was one of many things I did for the city of Detroit. I was also the deputy director of the Senior Citizen and Homeless Coordination Department when
Oh,
Archer was mayor.
oh, okay.
So I dealt
Yeah.
with homeless programs for about 12 years
Wow.
before that even.
How many mayors did you go through?
Well,
34
I
years.
started out with Mayor Gribbs. It was actually only four mayors.
Only four mayors.
Four
Okay.
mayors,
That's
yeah.
not bad.
Right. Coleman Young had 20 years, so yeah.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Mhm.
true. Um, but you've been coming to this church for 40 years?
40 years, yeah.
40 years.
Hmm.
Wow. Um, and you were raised Catholic, right?
Correct.
Okay. So, how did you end up coming here?
Well, it's a strange story. I moved downtown in 1980.
Uh-huh.
I lived in Lafayette Park. I was looking for a church in the neighborhood, and it seems most of the churches downtown at the time were either had Latin masses or they were ethnic churches. They were, Polish or German or something. So I kept going back. I actually went to St. Lucy's in St. Clair Shores for a while. My old parish had closed. And I was downtown at the Renaissance Center for a meeting one day, and I happened to see this church across the street. So I walked over, and there was mass going on, and I went inside.
Wow.
And I said, "Holy cats, I didn't even know this church was here." So my mother lived with me back then. So I said, "Hey, Mom, I think I found a church that we can go to. It actually has parking. That's one thing St. Aloysius didn't have done."
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, we came to church, and the people were so welcoming, I just kept coming. I joined the choir. I wasn't even here a month. I joined the choir.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're still here
Mm-hmm.
doing the choir. Uh, so you're kind of the resident historian, at least that's what I've been told. Um, and
Sort of.
sort of. I know there's several of you, but um, uh, help me again pronounce this. Bishop Lefevre?
Bishop Peter Paul Lefevre. Yeah.
Lefevre. Okay.
He was Belgian.
Oh, he was Belgian. Yeah. I was thinking German. So, and he actually started this church?
Yes, he was the founder of this church. This was his cathedral.
Got it. So how long was it a cathedral?
Almost 30 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Until the Jesuits came in 1877.
All right. So the Jesuits came in 1877. And how did that happen? Did he retire?
Well, Archbishop Lefebvre died in 1869.
Oh, got it.
And actually, he was buried under the altar of the church here.
Wow.
Uh,
He's not still there, though.
No, he left in 1939. He went to Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. So after he died, our Bishop Borges Caspar Borges became the bishop, and one of his goals was to have a institute of higher education in Detroit. Detroit was kind of growing, though it was still a really small town back then. It was probably had 15,000 people, but we had no higher education institutions that were Catholic in the place at all. So he entered in negotiations with the Jesuits to see if they would come and because they were known for educational institutions. They'd come and start a college or a high school or something. So they negotiated a while, and what happened was that he offered them St. Peter and Paul Cathedral in return for them starting a college.
Mm.
So that's how that happened. And the Jesuits came in 1877, and they actually got the deed to the church.
Oh, awesome.
So they own it outright.
Yeah, and they're getting ready to celebrate 150 years, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay, so I know there are a lot of unique things about the architecture of the building. So could we talk a little bit about that, like the architecture?
Okay. Yeah, when the church was built, it was built kind of as you could pay for it basis. So it took 4 years to build it.
Oh gosh.
And it's totally masonry, all brickwork. There was no steel skeleton or anything in it, no structural skill of any kind. It does have some big pillars in the church. Well, they were a lot bigger when it was first built.
Really?
They were actually trimmed down 2/3 of the size to what they are now. They were oak trees that came from the Upper Peninsula, probably virgin forest oak trees. They were just huge things. Anyway, actually the church was quite bare and plain when it was first constructed. Didn't even have heat in it. They had to install potbelly stoves, one in each corner.
I can't
believe that.
With the polar vortex we had this winter, I cannot imagine coming on a Sunday when it's 30 below.
Well, the other thing that happened was when it was dedicated in 1848 on June 29th. That was the anniversary of the feast of St. Peter and Paul.
Oh, yeah, right. And
so you get an idea that the church was maybe named after the bishop, Peter Paul Lefevre, yes. So, yeah, it was dedicated, and only the Saturday before the dedication was on a Thursday, believe it or not. It was a big Big
Wow.
to do in the city, though, because the city was real small then. It was only like 10,000 people. This was a big doing, believe me. They had 6 bishops came from across the country for the dedication of the new cathedral. And not only that, but the organ for the church, a 12-ton organ. It was called an urban organ, which was really apparently quite the thing. Second largest organ in the country at the time.
Oh my gosh.
Came here by a barge from New York City with it, the guy who made it, and some of his people. And then they had to hoist it up into the balcony of the church, and it weighed 12 tons. So they had to get a whole bunch of people, workmen here from Detroit, to help them, and they just barely got it in place in time for the dedication mass. It was unbelievable. Yeah, so that's one of the strange things about what happened back then.
Now the guts aren't still there, right?
The what?
The guts of the organ are not still there, right?
No, the organ case is there, and a couple of the old pipes are still there.
Oh,
Some of the big pipes are still original. Not too many of them, though, because it's been changed over the years. I think we've had 1, 2, 3 different organs, maybe 4. Wow. I think we're working on the 4th one right now.
Well, for 177 years, that's not bad.
No.
4 organs. I would have thought it would have been much more than that.
Yeah. Well, the other interesting thing is if you walk into our church today, you see a huge sculpture behind around the altar. It's the Flights Memorial Altar. And that's a really fantastic thing. But going back to 1848, that wasn't there. Okay. What was there was a wooden altar, and that was about it. A hand-carved wooden altar. It was a nice altar, but it wasn't until the 1850s even that there was any murals painted in the church.
Oh my goodness!
So I'm telling you just to tell you how plain the place was originally. So it was in the 1850s Bishop Lefebvre decided he needed to those pillars had to be slimmed down. That was just, they were just too big. And they arched the ceilings and put some paintings, murals on the ceilings back at that time. So we're not sure exactly who did them, but a fellow named Angelo Paldi, who had been a Mexican war veteran and later became a major in the Civil War, he's known to have painted some murals behind the altar.
Oh.
But those are probably gone now.
Got it.
Probably been painted over. We're not sure, but we don't think he did the ones on the ceiling that exist now.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Well, anyway, I was talking about the Flights Memorial Altar.
Oh yeah, right.
The big marble thing, which is that's all Carrara marble, by the way. Was made in Italy. A family named the Flights, George Flights' family. His wife, Elizabeth Flights, is who the altar is a memorial for. That's why it's called the Flights Memorial Altar. They paid $25,000 to have that done.
Wow.
Which is the equivalent of about $800,000 today.
Okay, I was gonna say what's this?
In 1908, they did it in 1908.
Wow.
And it was carved by a famous church sculptor named Joseph Sabel in New York City. And the design for it was done by Gustav Muller, a local architect here in Detroit. So anyway, when it was done, it was in pieces. It had to be shipped here in pieces because it was so huge. It weighs 17 tons.
Oh my goodness. More than the organ.
Yeah, it's 39 feet tall and 17 feet wide. And it has all these candelabra. As a matter of fact, it took them 6 months to put it up here because they had to shore up the floors and everything because it was so heavy.
Oh, wow.
As a matter of fact, they had to raise some of the floors, put stuff underneath. So anyway, you asked about the strange things in the church. But, one of the oldest things that's in the church is the baptismal font.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
Yeah, it was hand carved. We don't know who did that. But that is from 1848.
Didn't you say something about it was covered in paint or something?
Oh yeah, for the 150th anniversary, it was restored. It was just covered in coats and coats of paint. It was actually white paint that was about an inch thick
Oh
all
my
over it.
goodness.
So, Father Hartigan, who was the pastor in 1998, had it restored.
Wow. It's gorgeous. I'm gonna have to take some videos of that and put it in the podcast so people, or some pictures so people can see what they all look like.
Mm-hmm.
Now, uh, the Jesuits have always been Ignatian spirituality. A big thing about Ignatian spirituality is always justice issues. But really, this church, I think, when we talked earlier, that this church has been involved in justice issues since even before it became a Jesuit church, right? The Immigrant Society and St. Elizabeth's Benevolent Society, and then an orphanage. That was before it became Jesuit that
Yes.
those were started?
Excuse me. Bishop Lefebvre, this was his cathedral, but at the time he was Bishop of the Diocese of Detroit, which covered the entire state of Michigan.
Oh,
so he wasn't here at the cathedral a whole lot. He was traveling a lot.
Yeah.
So who really started a lot of these societies was Pastor Shaw, our first pastor.
Got it.
Edgar Evelyn St. Michael Shaw. He was said to have been a real fireball of a preacher, a spellbinding preacher, yes. And he helped start those societies in the church. The Immigrant Society is kind of self-evident. Most of the parishioners were probably immigrants themselves, Irish or well, there was a lot of French Canadians too. But the city was growing and it was getting more people coming in, Germans and Poles even. Lots of Irish people, and immigrants need some help to be settled and find a job and stuff like that. So it's kind of self-evident why there was an immigrant society, kind of a mutual aid society, if you would. The St. Elizabeth Benevolent Society was basically a kind of a form of a St. Vincent de Paul society.
Oh, got it.
It was to help people who were poor, who were running out of hard times. As a matter of fact, the city had a couple of cholera epidemics back in the 1840s and early 1850s, and the women of the parish here would help make clothes and provide food for the families who were stricken with death at the time from cholera or illness and couldn't work, or they lost their husband or something of that nature. So that's how those things came about. The orphanage, excuse me, Bishop Lefebvre at one time moved away from the residence at St. Anne's to another residence on Randolph near Jefferson.
Mm-hmm.
And when he had this church built, when the rectory was built, he moved over here. So the empty residence that he had on Randolph, he converted to an orphanage, and he brought in some sisters, the Sisters of Charity, to run it, because the city had no orphanages at the time. Bishop Lefebvre was responsible for opening 5 orphanages in the entire state of Michigan.
Wow.
So he did a lot of stuff like that.
Hmm.
He was also very much in favor of temperance. That was a big thing with him. So he started the temperance societies too. Mainly, he was concerned about temperance with Native Americans, and of course, he had an Irish, and he was very concerned about temperance with his priests. He had some priests here who were having some drinking problems, apparently.
Oh, yeah.
You have to remember, this was kind of a frontier town back then.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have Fort Wayne, right? It's not too far from here.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a frontier town. This was a very small place. In 1848.
Wow. That's crazy. Okay, so we've now we're here in the 21st century, sort of. Some days it doesn't feel like that. And the tradition of justice and Jesuit spirituality has continued. And so I know over the course of the last 20, 30 years, different things have been started. The Warming Center, which eventually became the Pope Francis Center. And then they've started some committees here for like inclusion committee, green team for environmental justice, and they do some work with Strangers No Longer. And then somebody donated a homeless Jesus statue. So can you talk about what that is and
Yeah,
kind of how that came about?
Sculptor Timothy Schmaltz has made a lot of homeless Jesus statues. Well, they're replica of this original.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of like all over the world in various places. Even in Rome, you'll find them. So we're lucky to have one right in front of our church. And what it is a statue of Jesus sleeping on a bench with a cloak over him. So you can't really see who it is, except when you look at his feet, you see there's marks from the crucifixion.
Oh, yeah.
So that's how we know it's homeless Jesus. And of course, it's to mean that, Christ is in everybody.
Right.
And you should recognize him in everybody. So how did it come here? Well, an anonymous patron of our church, and I think I know who it is, but I'm not going to say because the person wanted to be anonymous, thought it would be a good idea since we were into having a homeless shelter and helping people all these years. Started back in 1988.
Oh, wow.
So in 2015, it was installed in front of the church, and we had a blessing celebration, and it was done on the feast of St. Peter and Paul.
Everything gets done on that feast day. So we're continuing to do new ministries here, and I know you're involved in the inclusion committee. So can you just talk about a little bit how did that get started, and what?
How did the inclusion committee get started?
And then how? Oh, well, I don't know if we can tell that, right?
Well, not if you wanted to make it public. Maybe not.
I guess I'll rephrase that. How?
Well, I can talk a little bit about
yeah.
the church's legacy in social justice.
Okay, there you go. Social justice.
Once you didn't ask me about when the Jesuits came, what happened?
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, we missed that part. Well, when the Jesuits came, an interesting thing was happening. It was 1877 when they came, but the neighborhood around the church was changing a bit. And we had mostly, as I said, Irish and French Canadian people in the parish. But it was changing to where we had also Sicilians and Syrians and Lebanese people were moving in the neighborhood, especially south of Congress to the river. There was a lot of them. And their needs were becoming rather evident. Jefferson Avenue still had big mansions on it.
Really?
And all the rich people lived there. And many of them were our parishioners. Some of our parishioners were rather well-off people. Matter of fact, some of their descendants still are. They live in Grosse Pointe and Birmingham now. Quite a few of them are, and thankfully they've been patrons of this church too. Well, anyway, the young Sicilian kids and some of the others got involved with gangs, and they were kind of harassing the rich people on Jefferson Avenue, and this didn't go over too well, right? So one of our priests, Father Weinman was his name, Ferdinand Weinman, and he actually had a limp just like St. Ignatius.
Yeah.
And he decided he was going to learn a little bit of Italian and see if he could do something about this problem. He was actually probably one of the first social workers the city of Detroit ever saw.
Nice.
So he went down around Rivard and Franklin down there on the riverfront where the kids were hanging out. And he had a bell and probably brought a few treats with him. And he'd have the kids gather around and he'd tell them some gospel stories, try to keep them out of trouble. Finally, somehow he talked Francis Palms, who was an extremely wealthy businessman who lived across the street and was one of our parishioners, into giving him his barn to use for a recreation center and education place, so the kids had some place to go. So they had a boxing ring in there, and there was a library, and they had a couple of classes with very taught to speak English and catechism classes and things like that. So unfortunately, Father Weinman died in 1906, but a lot of women in the parish, that always takes to women,
Yes, it does.
decided they were going to carry on his work. So they started the Weinman Club. A lady named Josephine Van Dyke Brownson founded the club. And they raised enough money to actually open a permanent building called, they called it the Weinman Settlement Houses. It was on the corner of Lafayette, or not Lafayette, Larned and St. Aubin, just down the street from the church here, 425 Larned. And there they really had nice classes and everything for the kids, and involved the Syrians and Lebanese kids too at the time. And another organization was started to run the Weinman Settlement House, which became the League of Catholic Women, and now today it's called Matrix Human Services.
Wow!
And it did not only the Weinman Settlement House, but a whole bunch of other things. And that was founded by another lady from our parish whose name was Anastasia Casgrain, Mrs. Charles W. Casgrain.
Wow.
Annie. Everybody called her Annie. She was one of the most charitable people you'd ever meet. She did a lot of stuff herself, visiting the poor and the sick, and it was amazing. And anyway, I read her obituary from when she died. It was just quite a person.
Yeah.
So and then on top of that, Josephine Van Dyke Brownson, who I mentioned, she started up the Catholic Instruction League in our school basement.
Wow.
This was to teach catechism to Detroit kids who were going to public schools or maybe no school at all, to tell you the truth.
Right.
And that eventually became the Confraternity of Christian Doctrine program, which I think maybe people remember as the CCD program.
Yeah, I went to CCD.
Yeah, it's spread throughout the whole entire country. As a matter of fact, she ran the whole thing until she died. In 1933, the Pope gave her the Laetare Medal. No, I'm sorry, the Pro Ecclesia Medal. She got the Laetare Medal from Notre Dame. And the Pro Ecclesia Medal was the highest honor a layperson can get in the Catholic Church. So, I mean, we've had some really amazing people who attended this church and started some magnificent things. Another one was a guy who was a banker, Michael O'Brien.
Okay.
He and Father Friedan, and this was about 1883 maybe, somewhere around there. They started the first St. Vincent de Paul Society in the Detroit diocese.
Oh,
yeah? And we had it here until I was the last St. Vincent de Paul member when we shut down our chapter because of we had so much going on with the warming center and not very many people. Maybe it'll start up again someday, but so it was here for well over 100 years.
Wow. I guess I didn't realize St. Vincent de Paul's been around that long.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But Michael O'Brien was a rich banker. He owned a People's Savings Bank, I believe it was called. And so he started that here, and he also bought land on Lake Huron, which is now Camp Ozanam, which was a summer camp for kids, for poor kids, that St. Vincent de Paul still runs. It's still there.
Wow.
It's near Lakeport.
Oh. That's a lot of stuff.
That's a lot of stuff.
I mean, granted, it's been almost 177 years, so that's...
Well, anyway, you were asking me about the Conclusion Committee.
The Inclusion Committee.
Well, the Inclusion Committee was started up to be one that would draw attention to the fact that we needed to be more welcoming to people who were different than usual.
Right.
You know, people maybe who had a disability or who were of a different race, the nationality, or LGBTQ people, or whatever. maybe somebody who was divorced or just down on their luck, or a homeless person walked in there, and maybe mentally ill person. So what we're trying to do with the inclusion committee to say, hey, God loves all of us. We're all welcome in this church.
Yeah.
Regardless of who you are. So our major thing is to do activities that educate people on what's going on and how we can address being more welcoming, or that people have a sense of belonging, since DEI has become a dirty word these days. So, should I say that?
I think we can say that.
But so we plan to do various things, and we have done various things. One of them was we had a Dorothy Day night where we asked Father Lumpkin to come and tell us about Dorothy Day, who was a social activist. One of the other things we did is for Emancipation Day, Juneteenth, we arranged for our parishioners to go visit Second Baptist Church down the street, which was the site of the Underground Railroad, which was very interesting. They took us in the basement where the slaves were actually kept until they could be snuck across the border into Canada.
Wow.
So, so we're doing a lot of things like that. I think we're probably going to, at some point, arrange for people to go see the new bridge housing for our warming center.
Oh, yeah.
And also for to see the Holocaust memorial place near
I've been there
in the local area.
It's very well done, yes.
Yeah. So that's the things we're looking at doing and have done. And just general information. We do things, publish things in our newsletter about, I had one about notable women from our parish, to just show how we've had interesting women in this parish, and we shouldn't neglect the fact that we have women here. The church has a problem with women sometimes.
And it's Women's History Month.
And it is Women's History Month. And we've done something on St. Kateri Teka with we used to put her statue on the side altar for a while to call attention to Native American Month. So we're trying to do something, to recognize different things in different months.
Yeah, the new shrine is gorgeous.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, anything else you want to?
Oh, there's so many. I could sit here and talk for hours about things that went on with this church. 175 years is a long time.
Yep.
And I think one of the things I'm going to try and focus on myself, is to write maybe some little vignettes of some of the people who were in this parish.
Yeah.
And what they did. We did some about a couple of notable women who have all passed away now. Mary Ellen Reardon, for example, was a head of the American Federation of Teachers in Detroit, DFT. And there's been a lot of people who passed through this church's doors who have done a lot of really impactful things for the city.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. In case anybody wants to know, the room where the warming center operates now is called the Father Lovely Room.
Yeah.
Well, Father Art Lovely was our pastor in the late 1980s and early 90s, I would say. He was the pastor when I joined here 40 years ago. He was also the chaplain at the Wayne County Jail.
Really?
All that time. And he recruited quite a few of the lawyers from our law school to help him. And that's why we have so many lawyers in this parish. It's unbelievable. That's
well, yeah, we have got the law school right next door. So
we even had a lawyer who worked with Clarence Darrow on a civil rights case here in the city. Yeah.
Oh my goodness! Wow.
So it's amazing. We should have we published a book for our 175th anniversary that had a lot of pictures in it. But I was thinking of doing one that just had lot of short little biographies.
Right.
Because it's amazing what happened here.
It is. Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to seeing what new things are going to come out of this. So.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thanks.